Hey folks, what's up? Just like to bring you up to date again on the installation of the Turbo 350 transmission into my 92 Volvo 244, and have some interesting progress I've made so far. As you can see here, the dipstick is installed. That was one of my major points of worry. Actually, it went in without hardly any fanfare at all. I was extremely surprised, and it seems I don't have to do any extra smashing and bashing after all. I handled the top here with this bracket that I made. Hopefully you can see that. It's a simple L-shaped bracket, and then it has another reverse bend over here on the other end where it picks up the firewall. See if I can get a little closer. There we go. There, and it picks up there, and it also doubles as a nice handy retainer strap for the wire here to trap that. Okay, so the next step really is going to be to hang the turbocharger and manifold, and that's going to be next, and I will pick up the video from that point. Okay, here is my progress so far on the installation of the rear crossmember. You can see here that I've retained the factory spacers, and also I have the transmission pretty much centered in the tunnel exactly where I want it to be. I also decided to go ahead and drill the 3 holes right here in the extension plate, just in case I run into the problem of having to replace the mount and then find that the mount has either the 2 outer holes or just the center stud. At least this way I'm completely covered. Right here you can see right along the surface right here. I'm going to have Mitchell go ahead and weld this in for me. This will be a nice surface here for him to get the MIG on that. Also, you can't quite see it, but it's nice and tight right along here too, so we can run a MIG bead along there. But otherwise, this is pretty much buttoned up. I had a lot of slop issues in my shifter, so I went to my friends here locally at Lehman Volvo of York and ordered a shifter bushing. So that took care of the slop in here. Now I seem to get full engagement, and the shifter is definitely much tighter, but I can't quite tell if it's going into low range on the shifter, which of course is drive with this reverse pattern valve body. If I had a regular forward pattern valve body and I didn't have low gear, I wouldn't be worried about it. That's fine. If you can't physically put it into low, that's fine, because it starts out in low anyway. So I think I'm going to be switching valve bodies here in a little bit once I get all the kinks ironed out of this installation. As I'd mentioned before, the dipstick dropped right into place. I was astonished at just how easily it installed, and it snaked around, and it wasn't a problem. I am a little bit concerned at the construction of the dipstick. It's a low car unit I got from my local American Speed Center of York, and it only has 2 O-rings on the bottom and no way to really tighten the bottom part of the dipstick into the transmission. They just say put a dab of silicone on it in the instructions. So I'm really hoping that doesn't present any problems. One thing I can't stand is a bunch of leaks. So apparently it's a friction fit. There's a pair of O-rings. Hopefully they'll do their job. I had mounted the end of the dipstick up on the firewall. That seemed to really come out nice. And other than that, everything else seems to be working out okay. I have left to do under here is the transmission cooler lines. which I'll have to crawl under the other side of the car and show you guys what's going on there. But that's going to have to wait until I get the turbo hung and the downpipe hung, and those cooler lines will be probably the last thing to go on. So with that, we'll go topside. Oh, by the way, I decided to run a pair of spacers. I'm going to use the two outer position bolts in the rear cross member and the transmission mount. I'm just going to use two because I can, and because I think it's probably a little bit more stable than just a single pivoting point. The distance between the plate and the bottom of the transmission mount was like about 1.25 inches. So I whipped up a couple of quick and dirty simple aluminum spacers, and I'm going to be using, I went to my local Tractor Supply and I bought some grade 5 bolts here. So I'll go ahead and shorten those up as necessary. And I bought a 3-inch and a 2.5 here, and I think one or the other is going to do the job. So that takes care of that, and with that, the transmission really should be completely finished up. Okay, we're back up topside here, and you can see I've installed two of my engine pulling arms that I've bent up and made. Installed those in the intake studs here. My turbo exhaust manifold and turbo itself, when I go to install it, the studs are just like 1/8 of an inch too long. It's ridiculous. I just can't quite make it. So I loosened the lower motor mount stud down here, and with these arms on here, my buddy Iskafan will be able to pull the engine over just enough, and I can probably wiggle on the turbo setup. Other than that, the MS3 wiring daughter board and harness arrived in the mail, so Mitchell's down there fixing everything up and creating a wiring harness for me from that. Perhaps I'll be able to lay that out and show you folks what's going on with that. And I've decided to also add the 95-pound injectors. There's 55s in it right now, and I'm going to go and install the 95s and just crank it up. Maybe I'll shoot for 25 pounds of boost with the MS3. There's the option to run an electronic boost control solenoid. I'm going to go ahead and run that and set her at 25, and we'll see how she holds. The short block is pretty much stock with the addition of only those head studs, but there is a more substantial short block in the mix. I'm going to get the H-profile rods, and I've contacted Vinolia Pistons out there in California. I'm going to have to send them a turbo piston and have them custom make me a set of 4 pistons for this. So I'll add on to this then when the turbo is installed. Okay, here we have the rear cross member that Mitchell just welded up for me. I had her cool down here and put a nice good coat of solid paint on here. Good heavy stuff, heavy enamel, and I think that'll do just fine. He had welded it here and on the other side, and then underneath on this surface right here, and also on the front. So that completes the cross member, and I'm going to go ahead and bolt her in. Okay, it's the end of the day. I think we're going to call it a day here. We got quite a bit of progress done. As you can see, there's much more wiring going on here. Mitchell just about has his Mega Squirt wiring spaghetti here just about all routed. What he's going to do is create another separate video which he's going to explain his connections and his pathways that he's taken and the wires and so forth. I got the transmission finally assembled, and the Crossmember is in, and I could take you under the car briefly and show you that, and that pretty much wraps up the transmission except for the cooler lines, which will be almost last. Okay, here we go, under the car. It looks like the transmission is now supported and completely bolted in and finished. It's resting on the modified Crossmember, and the transmission mount is in place. This particular mount took some really heavy-duty 7/16 bolts. So I ended up using 2.5 inch long 7/16 bolts and bolting everything in. Everything's nice and tight and solid. Everything is aligned and straight, and it looks like I'm just about finished under here. Oh, the last thing I wanted to mention, I created an alignment mark on the center of the firewall as a reference point. I got this measurement from Mitchell's 244, which all had everything stock in place, and I needed an alignment point to make sure everything was in line as far as the engine being straight in the engine compartment. So what I did was I measured over from here. On his car it was 13 5/16 over, and what I did here was I made a mark on the firewall with a grease pencil, and that aligns kind of right along this edge where the valve cover bolts on. So you can see, hopefully, that kind of lines up. So that was just a very rough reference point for me, but I thought I'd mention that. It might help someone out. Until next time, I guess we'll catch you later.